Hey guys, it's your boy Kiddokin back here again. So today I want to talk about my problems with modern fighting games and why I think a lot of pro players have a lot of gripes with their respective fighting games. Specifically, I'm really just going to be talking about Street Fighter 6 obviously, and also Tekken 7 to a small degree, and maybe a little bit of Grand Blue too. And I'm also going to surprisingly talk about Samurai Showdown, but Samurai Showdown isn't problematic. It's actually a very good game. But we'll get down to that in a second. So I want to talk about, first to lay the groundwork, I want to talk about the 3-act structure of neutral. So every fighting game has neutral. You know, some fighting games like Melty Blood have air footsies, some have more grounded based footsies like Street Fighter 6. Some games have assists. Some games, you have something like Power Rangers Power for the Grid, where it's also an assist game, but it's also surprisingly very Street Fighter-esque in some ways. But anyways, the point is every fighting game has this 3-act structure of neutral. All fighting games have their versions of neutral, but they still follow the 3-act structure of neutral essentially. And Machibo and some of those pro players, they talked about and had articles about the 3-act structure of neutral. What is the 3-act structure of neutral? Poking or covering space, that loses to whiff punishing or whatever, and then whiff punishing being more reactive and defensive, giving up space to react to pokes, that loses to people walking forward. And then you have stuff like counter poking, which if you can't whiff punish certain buttons or can't whiff punish certain things, sometimes walking forward and doing like active pokes can also help you deal with people who are walking back and trying to whiff punish you and counter poke. Of course, like I said, there's exceptions to everything, but the general 3-act structure, poking beats people trying to walk forward or advance on you. Poking would lose to whiff punishing. Whiff punishing would beat poking. Whiff punishing loses to people who are walking forward. That's the 3-act structure of neutral. It's a balancing game, right? It's a 3-act structure that's balanced. So now I want to talk about, why do pro players initially, and probably still to this day, have such a hatred for mechanics like Drive Rush, and also hate mechanics like DI and all these things. So as I've said many times before, Street Fighter 6 is a game that was made to be the opposite of Street Fighter 5. So I'm going to only speak about Cammy and my experience with Cammy, and also Kareem, to an example. The problem with Street Fighter 5 is that that game was very reactive at the highest levels. You could practically react to everything because you could get your mental stack so low by practicing matchups and also understanding options in the game and also having the correct spacing. So that's why Punk was so dominant in that game, because number one, he already has naturally good reactions, but then his reactions were amped by the fact that he has so much matchup knowledge and practice, and he plays every character in the game. But if you look at what Punk specializes at, what does he specialize at? He specializes at playing characters who utilize basic fundamentals. So Karen and Kareem, and all they do, Karen and Cammy, and all they do is they just whiff punish people. They dive kick in Cammy's case, but they're just reactionary based characters. Cammy, when she got a barred meter, could do EX Power Arrow against people who had fireballs, so she could reaction get in. Now let's talk about the differences between Street Fighter 6 and Street Fighter 5 and how fighting games have shifted nowadays. So in Street Fighter 5, Cammy doesn't have any reactionary options, truly reactionary options to get her in. She has things like, she has her spin knuckle, she still has dive kick, and obviously she has like Drive Rush and all those things. But if you're playing against a alright opponent, and the way this game is made, you can't react to every option. I've said that 1,000 times, and that's intentional because they don't want this game to be like Street Fighter 5 or even like a game like Tekken 7. The reason why the pro players complained, like Arslan complained about, he complained about Tekken 8 initially, is because he couldn't play his style because heat impact, heat drive, whatever. That mechanic was very oppressive, and also the game was very different a couple months ago. Like throws with track, sidestepping wasn't as good. So basically, his fighting style, Punk's fighting style and Arslan's fighting style basically got came for. because they were the best players, and all they were doing, the developers were just watching them repeatedly win, or watching everybody essentially just try to copy their style and do their thing. Of course, there's other pro players doing their own thing, like, you know, Nemo playing Urian, and Gil coming up with these cool setups and whatnot. And that's why Luke is so dominant, because Luke was so dominant in Street Fighter V because he literally did everything else. He did everything perfectly. He had a great crouching medium kick that was hit confirmable. He had a great DP. He did a crap load of damage and stun. He had a pretty fast dash. He had great buttons. He had great checks. He literally did everything perfectly. And then on top of that, his V trigger didn't go down, so he got to control the neutral, and his fireball was like instant. So he was always controlling the neutral. If you look at Luke versus Luke mirror matches, or Luke versus other characters, it's just a snore fest for most people, because it's just Luke reacting to whatever they do and punishing you hard. I think Daigo once said, if the best thing to do in a game is nothing, it's a crap game. And so the Street Fighter developers didn't want to have that same problem in Street Fighter 6. So what did they do? They made the game more variable, then they made it more inconsistent. And if you want to look at Cammy is a perfect case study, because in Street Fighter V, Cammy players were very consistent. It was very consistent. You could always, you know, EX Power Arrow to get in against a fireball. Of course they came and nerfed that, but still, if you were good enough and had good spacing, it would still work. So what did they do? They, for example, this move, I think what they did, they slowed the, they moved the invincibility frames of it. Yeah, so initially this move used to be invincible, so as soon as it came out, you could kind of react to fireballs. But they changed that. Why did they change that? Because they didn't want Cammy like perfectly reacting to people throwing fireballs. Because they don't want to have that perfect reaction style. Because if you have that perfect reaction style, or where you get to the point to where you've lowered your mental stack to the point to where you can react to everything, the game is not solved. It's not solved in the sense where you know perfectly what your opponent's going to do. But because your mental stack is so low and you've practiced so much, your reactions are so good, it feels like you solved the game. When Punk was at its prime, he literally made people look like, he made other world-class players look like they didn't know how to play the game, because he's literally the best in the world at reacting and reacting and like to things. So what is Punk the best in the world at? Punk is the best in the world at playing a whiff punishing. He's good at playing that whiff punishing defensive style of the 3-act structure in neutral. But 3-act structure in neutral is not just one thing. So they didn't want Street Fighter 5. They didn't want Street Fighter 6 to be like Street Fighter 5, where you're just playing a defensive style, looking to react to things. So earlier I made a video talking about how to overcome mental stack, and the truth is, from my experience of playing Street Fighter 6, at least with Cammy, and really for everybody in this game, it's impossible to overcome the mental stack. And the reason why is because this game is not meant to do that. They want you to guess more. And what do I mean by guessing more? Because there's no way to truly react to all the options, you have to do more preemptive options. And this goes back to the 3-act structure of neutral. So what is the problem with modern fighting games? Why do people complain about neutral skips more than they ever have before in the history of fighting games? Because here's the joke. Neutral skips have always existed in fighting games, but they weren't as powerful. And if they were powerful, they either were exclusive to certain characters, or if they weren't exclusive, they had a higher price to pay. Fighting games had better checks and balances before. Modern fighting games are meant to sell more to casuals and be more accessible, because the legacy skill of understanding things like the 3-act structure of neutral, things about understanding spacing and reactions, things about understanding how everything is related and counts each other. All of that stuff is hard to understand, and it takes a long time to gain that understanding. Or it straight up just takes somebody to teach you. The problem is, they want to bring in new blood into fighting games, and they're a company first. They want to make money. At the end of the day, they want to make money. And Street Fighter 6 has been a major success, especially in Japan. Their numbers for Street Fighter 6 are crazy. So, how do you bring in new people? You make the game not boring. You make it more action and more aggressive. But when you make fighting games more actiony and more aggressive, you're tampering with the 3-act structure of neutral. And they intentionally tampered with the 3-act structure of neutral. Because like I said, this game is meant to be not as reactive. You can lower your mental stack in this game by understanding the options, but it's not the same as in a game like Street Fighter 5, where you can lower it to the point to where you can almost make the game feel solved. No matter how much you know in Street Fighter 6, you're always going to get caught by, a random DI. You're always going to get caught by a random jumping. And of course, these things did happen in every other fighting game. You do get caught by random things, but it doesn't happen with the same frequency that it happens in Street Fighter 6. Now, why is that? That's because, like I said, they made this game to the point to where you can't react to everything, and now it's intentional. So, let's go back to the 3-act structure of neutral. You have preemptive poking, you have whiff punishing or waiting options, and then you have moving forward. So, what is the problem with modern day neutral skips, and why has the neutral skip term become such a term itself? Why is it so hot these days? The reason why is because, like I said, in previous fighting games, neutral skips always did exist, but they weren't as problematic because the neutral skips essentially came down to, oh, somebody jumps a lot, somebody dashes a lot, or maybe there is a stupid character who has a bunch of neutral skips. For example, Seth in Street Fighter 4 is a stupid character, but he's balanced around the fact that he doesn't have any health, and he doesn't have a great reversal game. So even though Seth has all these stupid things and neutral skips, he's balanced around the fact that he's a glass cannon. That's kind of the same design philosophy with Akuma, or characters like that. That's why it's okay for him to have these neutral skips. Or, for example, people talk about Vega. Well, those games, Street Fighter 2, those were the beginning of fighting games. The developers didn't know what they were doing. Using him as an example of neutral skips always existing is a stupid point. It's a moot point because those games weren't even designed well. So who can really, that's not a great example to justify saying neutral skips have always existed. That's not a good argument to ignore people when they say that fighting games are more random or fighting games are more gimmicky or guessy, because they do have a point. And the point that they're trying to make is, before in fighting games, yes, there have always been neutral skips, but their power level wasn't so high. And if their power level was high, there was always a cost that came with that. I'll give you two more examples. Makoto from the Street Fighter series, and Kazuya. Kazuya has the perfect electric wing Gappas, or electric wing Gappas, electrics. Now electrics do broken damage, they are great for pushback on blocks, so they're great for controlling space. They're a great poke in general. They come out fast. The only way you can really cope with them or deal with them is if you duck them. But ducking them is a high risk, because then you have to deal with getting hit by a demon paw or other mids or things of that nature. The good thing about an electric is that it does all these things. It's a high power move, but it has a weakness, and the weakness is consistency in your execution. So Kazuya really, at the end of the day, hold up, let me fix this. At the end of the day, Kazuya is a character that is balanced around his hell sweep and his ability to do electrics and some mids and a few other moves. The point of Kazuya is not to play really a defensive style in neutral. It's to get in and pressure you and put you in a 50-50. He's a high risk, high reward character. He's a character balanced around power and consistency. His consistency is low because his power is so high. Because if the Kazuya player is having a good day, they can really just do it to you. They can kill you easily. It's not the same as playing a character like Xiaoyu or playing a character like Leo. They're different. They're just different because they value different things. So, yes, an electric is not a neutral skip, but it's a well-balanced mechanic. And the point that I'm trying to say, now let's go to third strike. Let's go to Makoto. Makoto literally has a neutral skip. It's just her movement, her dash. But Makoto has a terrible walk speed. That's the balance. Yes, she has this stupid dash, and she can command grab you and kill you. But one, that command grab takes execution to do. And then number two, all she has horrible space adjustment. So you have to adjust for that. She loses out on other fundamental aspects of playing the game because she has such a stupid dash that's so instant. The problem with modern day fighters is they lack checks and balances. And that's why people complain about it. Because, okay, everybody has a universal drive rush, but number one, obviously they have to balance in a way because every character can't have DJ's drive rush. Every character can't have fireball drive rush. But the problem is, those mechanics are so powerful, they become the meta. So what I'm trying to say, if you play a fighting game that has unblockables, unblockables are unblockable. They are such a strong strategy that why wouldn't everybody go for it? This creates homogenized gameplay. It creates everybody playing the same. Even if you're playing a different character, you play the same because the meta is so strong. Everybody just goes for unblockables. And guess what? The best characters can do the unblockables the most consistently. And the point that I'm just trying to illustrate is that it homogenizes gameplay. And the problem with modern day fighters is that they made walking forward, they made skipping neutral, they made the moving forward aspect of fighting games overpowered relative to the other aspects of neutral. And the reason why is because they want to bring in more new blood. They want to make fighting games more exciting. They want to make them more inconsistent so they can sell more. But the problem with that is you hurt players with legacy skill. You hurt characters who have the archetypes of zoning, or you hurt characters who have the archetypes of reacting and punishing, and they become worse, and they become overshadowed in the system, because essentially the modern day fighters, they don't allow for reactive gameplay. They don't allow for you to do spacing traps. They don't allow for these things. And if they allow for them, it doesn't matter because you're technically playing off meta. Can you win playing off meta? Yes. But the point of consistently winning, if you want to be a professional player, it's about consistency. And the reason why pro players complain about Street Fighter 6, why they complained about Street Fighter 7, why they complain about Street Fighter 6, why they complained about Tekken 8, why they complained about Grand Blue Fantasy Versus initially. The reason why they had all these complaints is because the games are literally naturally made to be more inconsistent. Because the 3-act structure of neutral, the balancing act, the checks and balances is off balanced. Because you're trying to make, what sense does it make to have a character like DJ, who's kind of like a mid-range, zony type character, and he's keeping you out, and he has really good keep out and really good buttons, and then he just zooms across the screen and instantly gets in on you? That doesn't make any sense. Now, there are two solutions to this. You can complain, or you can adapt, and that's true. Or fighting games could, go back to being more balanced and respecting the 3-act structure. Now, what did Street Fighter 6 do? They added mechanics like parry in the game, because parry is a strong mechanic. It's supposed to help you counter all these neutral skips and stuff like that. The only problem is, the only time it's actually good is when it's perfect parry. But perfect parry is inconsistent naturally because it has a 2-frame window, so you always can't perfect parry. So, let's talk about Cammy. Why is Cammy strong in Street Fighter 6, even though, like I said, she technically doesn't have the best drive rush? And all of her options to get in on you, she has to preemptively do them, because she can't react like her Street Fighter 5 counterpart. So why is Cammy still good? Because theoretically, with everything I'm saying, Cammy should be trash. So am I a fraud? Am I lying? No. The reason why Cammy is good, and good in Street Fighter 6, is still because she's an aggressive rushdown character, essentially. But what is it specifically that makes Cammy still good? But it's not even about Cammy. It's about understanding fundamentals. This is why Punk said, you can nerf my character, or you can nerf this or nerf that. You can't nerf my skill. And what is the skill in this case? It's understanding. It's knowing what fighting games are. It's understanding why things are the way they are. So, for example, why is Cammy still good, even though she doesn't have access to stupid strategies like Fireball Drive Rush, which is just an assist, honestly. So, or why she doesn't have or why she can still win without a teleport like Jury and DJ, or why she can still win without being able to control the neutral like other Fireball characters, because a Fireball is a poke and it literally counters Drive Rush. Why can she still win even though she doesn't have all those options? The reason why is going back to the 3-act structure in neutral. How do you counter people who are moving forward? How do you counter neutral skips? Because neutral skips are moves that move forward. You press preemptive buttons. You do preemptive things. So, and guess what? That makes the game more inconsistent. And that's the whole point. But why are there still pro players who can play with Cammy at a high level? Because they're just a little bit more consistent than you, at using inconsistent tools. That's the secret. That's how you quote unquote overcome mental stack in these games. So when you have games like Street Fighter 6, Grand Blue Fantasy Versus, or even Tekken 7 Tekken 8 to a lesser degree, you have to become a more aggressive player. That's the way you have to win. You have to do more preemptive options. You can't just sit in the neutral and wait. If you try to sit in the neutral and wait, three things are going to happen to you, but they all lead to the same thing. You're either going to have to not look for certain options, but if you don't look for certain options, you will get checked by those options, because the same range that Kimberly over here can drive rush from is the same range that somebody like Ken can throw a fireball at you and drive rush in, or he can just drive rush in, or he can jump, or he can do Dragon Lash. The point is, all of those options are good, but they're all good within the same range. That's extremely problematic, because guess what? You can't eliminate any of those options from the mental stack, because if you do, you're just going to get surprised by one of those options. They're going to get in, and then they're going to run a pressive mix-up on you and pressure. Okay, so you can't eliminate the mental stack. So what else happens if you try to react? Well, if you try to react, you're just going to mess up. There's going to be something that you don't react to, and you're going to be sitting, there's going to be something you don't react to. So that's the other problem. Okay, so what if one day you're able to react to everything? Well, you're not going to be able to react to everything consistently. Sooner or later, you're going to get gimmicked, or you're going to get overwhelmed, or what's going to happen is you're going to react to everything, right? But you're never going to get in a situation where you're at advantage, because you're always playing from disadvantage. It's better to avoid a bad situation entirely than to make a bad situation into a good one. Because you know what's the best thing? To be at advantage. You know what the best block is? Don't be there. Don't be good at blocking. Be good at being in your win condition. That's what's more important. If somebody does fireball drive rush on me, right? With Cammy, what I can do, I can react and DP and get through it. But the problem is, I'm just gonna be reset to neutral because of the way Cammy's the way her DP works. They do fireball drive rush. I'm back full screen. That was irrelevant. All I did was reset the situation for them to do it again. So that's what I mean by, what's the point of reacting to these situations when all you're gonna do is just perpetuate the same situation you're in? You know what would have been better? If I would have just got in and ran my gameplay as Cammy. So, what is the answer to dealing with these problems? To dealing with all these neutral skips? Like I said, it's preemptively doing things. If you go watch any gameplay of Punk playing, or any high level Cammy player, go watch Cammy versus Ryu, and what you'll just see is the Cammy players, they'll try to spin knuckle in, they'll try to perfect parry, they'll try to jump in, they'll try to dive kick. Now, that's what all Cammy players do, but why are you a lower rank and why are they a higher rank? The truth is, they're just more consistent than you at knowing the timing. That's all it is. They're just better at preemptively doing these options, because I promise you they're not reacting. It's literally impossible. If Punk himself has to use drive rush and neutral, if he has to do all these options to get in, I promise you can't react. And this isn't to glaze Punk or talk about how great Punk is. The idea is just that Punk is the best in the world at playing reactive, defensive footsies. He's the best at using that aspect of the 3-act structure of neutral. And even he can't play that style in this game because it's literally impossible. It's mathematically impossible because of all the options you have to look for. It's spatially impossible because there's too many good options in one range. It's made to be that way. This game is made to be more inconsistent, but the best players are still consistent. Why? It's just because their timing is good, or it's just because they're using characters that are optimal in this system. Who are the characters that are optimal in this system? Luke, Ken, Rashid, Akuma. What do these characters have in common? They all have things like fireball drive rush, and they have a fireball which controls the neutral. Or if you're like Rashid, you have level 2, which, is just a bullshit mechanic, and then you get to rush people down for free. They can't do anything about it. Okay, so then what about Ken? What about Luke? They just control the neutral because they have a fireball. And then Ken has fireball drive rush, so he can rush you down. They actually can control the neutral and play a defensive reactive game because they have a fireball. Because how you gonna What's gonna happen when you try to drive rush and they throw a fireball and they hit you in the face? You just don't get in. Or if they're a good player and their spacing is good, they're gonna throw a fireball from a range of like right around here, and then you're gonna be Cammy. You're gonna try to dive kick in or you're gonna jump, but then they're gonna recover from their fireball. And what are they gonna do? They're gonna anti-air you. Oh, by the way, I forgot Gal and Chun-Li. Those characters are good too because they do the same thing. So, what do you do as a rushdown character like Kimberly or Cammy trying to get in? You just have to get good at playing preemptive neutral. You have to get good at preemptively moving forward, preemptively using your dive kick, preemptively using your spin, preemptively using dive kick, or preemptively buffering into drive rush in neutral. Though you have to play a preemptive style, but this just isn't Street Fighter 6. This is Grand Blue Fantasy Versus, and this is also, to a certain degree, Tekken 8. Tekken 8's problem is more of a Street Fighter 5 V-trigger problem. That's what the heat system is. It's just V-trigger. It makes the characters more oppressive and more strong. But the reason why is Fang one of the best characters? Why is Dragunov one of the best characters? Why are Nina and them the best characters? It's because they're good characters by themselves who have been buffed by all the new moves and stuff they get from Tekken 8. But then on top of that, and the rushdown characters, but then on top of that, they have strong heat situations that put you in 50-50s. If you're playing Tekken 8 and you're not playing a character who has strong 50-50s, you're kind of trolling, because why are you pushing the boulder up the mountain for no reason? Because why are you trying to play this defensive style in a game that's meant to be aggressive? Have they made changes to make sidestepping and defense more viable? Yes, but at the end of the day, the game has heat in it. It's V-trigger. You're meant to play aggressive. You're not going to play this reactive style unless you're Arslan Ash and you're playing Nina. And even Arslan Ash, yeah, he's poking and he's doing all these things, but that's just because Arslan Ash is the best. Of course he can do that. But even Arslan Ash, just like Punk, he has to concede and he has to use heat. He has to abuse the system. So why did I mention Samurai Showdown? Samurai Showdown is a wonderful fighting game because it's a balanced fighting game. It's a fighting game that leans more towards reacting in the 3-act structure of neutral. But SNK developers, especially for Samurai Showdown, are actually extremely good at balancing fighting games. Samurai Showdown is like the best balanced fighting game I've ever seen in my life. Like, of course, there are like problem characters like, Baiken or whatever. But the reason why Baiken is a problem character is because she kind of like plays the meta too well, and then she kind of does stupid meta breaking things. But that's just normal fighting game stuff, honestly. But regardless of a few things here and there, the base roster is pretty well balanced and pretty well thought out. And I think more fighting games developers, in my opinion, I wish they would move towards a more Samurai Showdown style of balancing things, of having checks and balances, and having things not be overtuned. Or if they're overtuned, there's a check for it. There's a balance to it. But anyways, that's really all I wanted to say. That's what I wanted to say. That's the problems with modern fighting games. Are they more aggressive? Yes. Are they more random? Yes. Are they more consistent? Yes. But there are still ways to be consistent even in an inconsistent system. And that's why I mentioned being more preemptive. But being more preemptive makes everybody have to be more aggressive. So that's why fighting games feel like, that's why a lot of pros say things like, I feel like fighting games are more homogenized or more trying to be aggressive, because they literally are. Because it makes more money, it's more exciting, and that's why the developers are balancing the game in this way. And the problem is, it kills archetypes like zoning or space control, because they just can't thrive in that type of situation. That's why, for example, why Sagat sucked in Street Fighter V, because he was a zoning character, a space control character, but people had instant get-in moves like Cammy doing reactive spiral arrow. But he wouldn't really do great in a game like this either, because everybody has instant teleports in, or they have all these things that mental stack him. He can't react. You know what he would have to do? He would have to do what everybody else is doing. Drive rush in. Do all this to get in. But then he's not playing the point of his character. And that's a useless character, because your character don't even work in the system. And it also reminds me of some problems with Mortal Kombat 1, but I'm not going to talk about Mortal Kombat. right now. Anyways, so that's all I really have to say today. That's enough of me yapping. But this is really the truth about modern day fighting games and the differences between modern day fighting games and older fighting games. Older fighting games had BS in them. They were broken and unbalanced in some ways. But when fighting game developers became better at making fighting games, they did kind of do their due diligence at least attempting to make things balanced. The paradoxical thing about today is fighting game developers are better at developing fighting games than they ever have been, because I can tell from the way that Street Fighter 6 is made. It's actually a really well-made fighting game for their intents and purposes for what the game is meant to do. The reason why a lot of pro players don't like it is because, like I said, the balancing act of the 3-act structure in neutral and how that affects literally everything else in the game is intentionally designed to be skewed towards moving forward and rush down. And the only way you can counter it is by being preemptive, because the natural counter to whiff punishing and being defensive is moving forward. So it's already naturally countered that moving forward. Whiff punishing is already naturally countered by moving forward in neutral skips. The problem is the neutral skips in the past were like a level 1, level 5. Now they're like a level 10. And the reward for doing them is so much higher compared to what they used to be. You could cry about how, oh, neutral skips have always existed. Yeah, but they were never this overpowered. And even when they were, there were checks and balances to them. And when they weren't, guess what? We call those games Kasoge games, and people played them ironically. And that's the difference. So anyways, that's all I really want to say today, guys. So, I have some more videos up later this week or whatever. But that's my main thing I want to talk about. And, I was very passionate about this. And so, I might link to some other people who they don't exactly talk about this concept, but they're like supplemental videos that kind of help me come to this conclusion and from my experience. And that's all I really want to say. Thank you guys for watching. Have a good time.